If your upper back exercises have been worsening your back symptoms, then let me show you the most effective and safe way to train your back. The first thing you need to understand is that most of your standard traditional weightlifting strategies aimed at strengthening your upper back are probably doing you more harm than good. Now, there are two major problems with the traditional standardized approach. Number one, they focus on exercises that are attempting to isolate specific muscle groups, rather than using whole body movement strategies where the focus is on coordinated activities of groups of muscles. Number two, most of these exercises train artificial resisted movement patterns of your arms, rather than training mobility and control over your upper back and spine using support and stabilization through your arms. While most of these traditional weightlifting exercises for your upper back are not inherently bad, if that is all you are doing, then you're missing out on a whole other category of exercises that are involved with injury prevention, strength, and control of your back, and these are referred to as stabilization exercises. Stabilization exercises for your upper back are primarily focused about controlling the posture and movement of your back while the rest of your body generally moves. So we are going to set out some practical guidelines regarding the posture and movement of your upper quarter, which not only includes the upper back, but also your head, neck, and shoulders. First, your posture when viewed from behind ought to demonstrate a relatively broad and wide shoulder, and your shoulders ought to be slightly depressed or lowered to the ground. Your spine, head, and neck ought to feel elongated or like it's lifting up towards the ceiling without jutting your chin out. Finally, this posture should not require much effort. So if you feel like you're putting in significant effort to get to or maintain the posture, just step back, relax, and try it again because it ought to be relatively effortless. Second, when viewed from the side, your posture should still remain relatively long and tall, but we obviously don't want to accentuate any of the curves of your head, neck, or upper back. So we don't want to be jutting the chin out, rounding the shoulders forward, but we also don't want to be squeezing your shoulders down and back. You essentially just want to remain relatively neutral, tall, and relaxed. So now that you understand these practical guidelines, let's see how we apply these principles to some specific upper back exercises. This is the setup and execution of the prone head raise. And rather than talking to you with my face down on the floor, I'm just going to describe the initial setup. I am going to lie completely face down with both arms up above my head. The positioning of the arms has some particulars to it. The elbows want to be in line with your ear, and your hand wants to be somewhat in line with the shoulder. Once I'm down there with my head straight down, I'm going to begin to breathe and focus my breath into my belly, breathing normally in and out, followed by a slight abdominal contraction, which I'm going to refer to as a brace. This contraction is actually a contraction of my belly outward slightly. That will support my pelvis and back, that enables me to lift my head properly. The additional support for the head raise from that prone position comes through my elbows. So I'm primarily going to be feeling weight into my elbows and almost just below my belly button through that abdominal bracing or contraction. When I lift this head up, it's not going to be a huge head raise. I'm going to lift maybe 4 or 6 inches off the ground, but I'm going to be maintaining my shoulders broad and wide. My head and neck should be relatively long. None of the arches or curves in my back should be accentuated, and I should be able to breathe relatively relaxed as I focus on maintaining that bracing control and support through my abdomen. Finally, I don't want to be resting on my rib cage when I'm lifting my head. So you should feel some weight into this lower part of your abdomen. Also, while this is not the most difficult exercise in the world, it should not take a significant amount of effort. So if you feel like you're straining, back off, try it again with a little bit much less effort. So this is what it looks like. Gonna lie completely face down, place both arms above my head with my elbows in line with my ear, hand in line with my shoulder, lying completely face down. I'm going to attempt to brace now, which will cause that slight abdominal contraction, a widening of the shoulder blades, and then I'll lift my head. One more time, notice that when I lift my head is still looking down to the floor. I don't look up and out in front of me, but I look down to the floor as I breathe in and out, focusing on that abdominal brace and support through my elbows as well as my belly. Couple things about this exercise. First, if you find it extremely difficult, you're probably doing it wrong. This should require a minimal amount of effort and focus to be able to hold the head upright against gravity while breathing. Second, it does serve as our basic foundational postural support for the entire upper quarter. So you should take a bit of time to master it and understand what it feels like to properly support our head, neck, and shoulder. The setup for the oblique sit basic position is that you're going to be resting on your side with most of the weight on the downside hip, the leg and knee directly out in front of you, and the leg straight down. Top leg is resting at its side, top arm resting at your side, and you're actually going to be supporting yourself on this bottom elbow and forearm. That elbow is directly underneath the shoulder with the forearm and hand turned down to the floor. This is not necessarily the beginning yet. You still want to put weight and force through your forearm to lift yourself, your chest, head, neck, and shoulders up and away from the floor, and then slightly rotate your chest and top arm forward. My head is looking down, but it is relatively straight. This is my starting position. To continue the exercise, we are going to reach and rotate our chest over the bottom shoulder further, putting more weight into that bottom arm, forcing us to stabilize the shoulder and protect our upper backs. Again, one more time, we rotate, we reach, but we maintain the pressure through the bottom arm to maintain proper control and stabilization of the entire upper quarter. This exercise is a great example of a whole body movement where we're choosing to focus our efforts on the upper quarter. More specifically, that downside arm that's in contact with the ground is training support and stability of your shoulder, that key feature for injury and pain reduction. Of course, the topside arm is involved with strength training, resisted movements, and just simple strength and power. Here's another stretch for your upper back pain. It starts with you on all fours, and it's going to involve rotation of your upper body reaching up to the ceiling, and it looks something like this. Get ourselves into an all fours position with your knees a little bit wider than your hips, hands directly underneath your shoulders, back relatively straight and neutral. You're then going to keep your pelvis and low back facing forward as you reach with your upper body up to the ceiling. You're going to do this in both directions, twisting the upper back up towards the ceiling. One thing to keep in mind is this is not that large of a movement. If you move too much and reach way up to the ceiling, you're going to be torquing your lower back and pelvis, essentially making the stretch not that useful. So make sure to keep your low back and pelvis relatively facing forward as you stretch up to the ceiling, hold for a breath, and then come back down. This can be done on both sides. My recommendation would be to add these exercises into your normal strength training routine so that you're not only training resisted movements, but you're also beginning to train stabilization, endurance, and control over your spine. Of course, if any of these exercises seem to significantly worsen your upper back symptoms, then I suggest taking a break, stopping, and trying them again at a later time. If significant worsening persists, then I suggest trying ice or heat because they may just not be for you. Finally, if you have been experiencing significant upper back symptoms or would just simply like a professional evaluation and treatment that comes directly to your home or place of business, then please click the link in the description below and I'll see you soon.